Hot Girl's Transparent Guide to Crypto. Crypto is well known for being rife with a lot of scammers and grifters, and I can attest to that from personal experience. I used to work in the crypto space for a few years. However, I no longer work in the space. And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this so I can be as transparent as possible. Today's episode is geared towards people that may not really know what crypto is and want to learn a little bit more about it. Okay, this isn't the be all and end all in crypto. I'm not about to go to fucking Stanford and do masterclasses on the shit. Now, before we jump in, a little disclaimer. Everything in this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. It is not financial advice. Okay, let me be clear. I am not qualified to give financial advice. I do not have a license. I'm just a hot chick who worked in the crypto space and now wants a lobotomy. If you decide to invest in crypto, I want you to be aware that you're doing so at your own risk, and you should be prepared to lose the entire amount of your investment. And again, for full transparency, I've worked in the crypto space for a few years. I no longer work in the crypto space. But with that said, I still don't want to represent myself as an expert on matters when it comes to cryptocurrency, especially because I've been out of the space for like a year or so now. So I don't want to represent myself as an expert. Don't go and buy something just because I've mentioned it in this podcast. Please, for the love of God, do your own research before you decide to invest in anything. With that said, let's jump into it. Crypto as an industry has been around since 2009, technically 2008. That was when the Bitcoin white paper was published by a person or a group of people, we don't know, an anonymous pseudonym. And that person or persons go by Satoshi Nakamoto. It's one of the greatest mysteries to this day that we do not know who published the original Bitcoin white paper. So that was published in 2008. The Bitcoin network went live in 2009, and that was also in response to the global financial crisis, which happened in 2008 in the US as a result of subprime mortgage loans. Bitcoin is effectively the granddaddy of crypto. Bitcoin is essentially a peer-to-peer network which provides rewards for people participating in the network. And you might be wondering, what is a peer-to-peer network? Well, if you've used LimeWire back in the day, for those of you who were familiar during the era of like 2007, it's like dial-up internet, you're wanting to pirate music, you download LimeWire. And so LimeWire didn't have any sort of intermediary. It wasn't controlled by a single entity. And it was peer-to-peer. So someone would upload like a ripped track or whatever, and then you, as another peer on that network, could download it. But there wasn't any sort of intermediary or person in the middle who is verifying that this file isn't malware or anything like that. And so that's like how you would end up sometimes getting tracks, and it's just like you end up getting fucking rickrolled, okay? Peer-to-peer network. There isn't any intermediary. This is a contrast to most of our institutions and structures in place today, where, for example, if I want to send money to someone via the banking system, the bank acts as an intermediary. Bitcoin is one type of blockchain. You might be wondering, what is a blockchain? The most simple way that I like to describe what a blockchain is, similar to a database where you can read and write and edit a database. A blockchain is effectively a database where you can read and you can write, but you can't edit. Once a transaction is confirmed or mined, if you will, on the network, that transaction will live there forever. So no one can change it unless they fork the entire blockchain, which is an entirely separate thing. I shouldn't have mentioned that because it would probably confuse people. A blockchain can confirm transactions through a few different ways. This is known formally as a consensus mechanism. So a consensus mechanism is a way for many computers on the network that are running the certain blockchain software to agree on whether a transaction becomes confirmed or not. So Bitcoin uses a proof of work consensus mechanism. And what that means is that in order for a transaction to be confirmed onto or mined into the chain, it has to be verified and confirmed by pretty much every single node in the network. That is why Bitcoin is kind of known as being not that environmentally friendly, because it requires every node in the chain or computer in the chain to verify a transaction, which you can imagine, considering the hundreds of thousands of nodes running Bitcoin software around the world, that will be a very energy intensive process. Proof of work isn't the only consensus mechanism for blockchains. You've got Ethereum. Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency. A few years ago, transitioned from a proof of work consensus mechanism where every single node in the network had to verify and confirm a transaction to proof of stake. And it was a very historical moment in cryptocurrency history. Proof of stake means in order for you to confirm transactions as a node operator on a network, you would have to stake a certain amount of cryptocurrency. So in the example of Ethereum, you have to stake 32 ETH in order to run a node that confirms transactions. And basically what that means is incentivizes people to not run any malicious attacks on the network or to confirm shady and dodgy transactions. Because if that node operator is suspected of being a bad actor, they would forfeit. It is already pre-programmed that they would forfeit the amount of cryptocurrency that they have staked. But you might be wondering, why do people stake cryptocurrency? Why do people bother running a node or a computer that confirms transactions for a network? That's a great question. The incentive is mining rewards or staking rewards. So people who run a node and help confirm transactions into the network, they get certain rewards they get a reward for running the node and help securing the network. Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're probably arguably the most well-known cryptocurrencies. Then you've got several other cryptocurrency projects. Also be familiar with Dogecoin, popularized by none other than Elon Musk, who honestly should be fucking sued by the SEC. The way that he was absolutely manipulating the market. As a little fun fact, as an aside, like, you've literally got trading algorithms or trading bots now that detects as soon as Elon even mentions a dog or Doge in a tweet, that algorithm will immediately purchase Dogecoin, which will just pushes the price up of that cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency industry isn't centralized, it's decentralized. So what that means is that there's no central point of power, there's no central point of ownership. It's kind of owned by everyone, with Bitcoin being the prime example of something that's quite decentralized, in that there's no majority party that owns or has significant power over Bitcoin. But yeah, you've got a range of different projects in the crypto space. You've got Bitcoin and Ethereum. You might have heard of other crypto projects like Pepe, which, FYI, I'm invested in all of these except for Dogecoin. And look, I'll be honest, crypto as an industry is very silly. Okay, you've got some people who say that they're trying to revolutionize the finance industry. They're trying to change the world. They're trying to democratize finance and make it for the people instead of for institutions. I'll be honest, at the end of the day, that is not my view. At the end of the day, my view is that a lot of the people in the crypto space are there to make money. And it is a very highly speculative industry. It is very silly though, and it provides its fair share of entertainment. Like, there's a whole crypto culture that comes with the industry, such as Michael Saylor, who's just a meme. Michael Saylor, he's like the chairman of MicroStrategy, and he has bought thousands of Bitcoins, and he just accumulates that shit. And he's what's known as a Bitcoin maxi. So Bitcoin maxis, they think that Bitcoin is like the one true only crypto, and they kind of are designated by having laser beam It's actually outrageous. They have like laser beam profile pictures on Twitter and X, which I think a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, Twitter erupted because Joe Biden uploaded a Terminator-esque photo of him with laser beam photoshopped onto it, and everyone was like, oh my God, Biden's a Bitcoin maxi, like, it's just outrageous. And then if you ever want to piss off Bitcoin maxis, you just say like Ethereum will flip BTC. That's like a known argument. They've been arguing about that shit, and no one will get more triggered than a Bitcoin maxi when you say like ETH will flip BTC one day. What else is funny about crypto culture? It's very male dominated, and it does attract a lot of neurodivergent people. Coming from someone who is neurodivergent, I say this with peace and love. It's effectively gambling, I think, for a lot of neurodivergent people. Yeah, you get some like anarchist people who are quite like anti-establishment. Lots of memes. Memes is like the primary way like people communicate, and like tweets. And there's never really a dull moment. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I watched my redundancy play out on Twitter, which it all started happening around the time just before FTX went tits up. So for those of you who aren't familiar, FTX was one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, and they were originally from the US but operating out of the Bahamas for tax avoidance reasons, obviously. Anyways, the largest exchange in the world is Binance, which is spearheaded by a man known as CZ. So anyways, you got like the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, which is Binance. CZ, him and the then CEO of FTX.com, which is Sam Bankman-Fried, just start beefing on Twitter. I literally saw, it was like watching a car crash and watching it in slow motion. It all happened over the space of a week. For whatever reason, CZ and Sam Bankman-Fried, or otherwise known as SBF, they start beefing, and I mean beefing on Twitter. Next minute, I'm out of a job. Everything kind of, takes place on Twitter, which has its own kind of unique culture. And as like another little aside, I will never forget when this would have been around the height of Dogecoin. I have very strong opinions about Elon Musk that aren't favorable. I learned the lesson the hard way. Like, you do not go to a crypto function and talk shit about Elon Musk. Here I am. I walk into this conference. We get on the topic of Dogecoin, which was pumping at that point in time. I think it was like just about to hit an all-time high. Meanwhile, I start running my mouth about Elon Musk, being like, rah, rah, rah. Crickets. And then I'm like, so guys, like, you guys gonna reply to what I said? And they're like, I drive a Tesla, by the way. And I'm like, shit. So dick riding Elon is also a big part of the culture, as well as like anyone in the Silicon Valley, to be honest. Crypto is very much ingrained, I think. It like overlaps quite a lot with like the Silicon Valley like tech bro culture. And I know that I'm like putting crypto in quite an unfavorable light, but there is like some merit to the space. You do get some like very passionate people, which is really cool. I always felt like quite inspired the passion of other people in the space, particularly like within the Web3 space, which is another niche subsection of crypto that I'm not going to go into. Changing tact quite a little bit, I thought I would kind of address some certain preconceived notions about crypto, because there's a few common public misconceptions, and I just want to like address it a little bit. Okay. Number one, the first kind of public misconception about crypto is that it's inherently worthless, to which I would often say, send me a Bitcoin then. Doesn't have to be a full one. Half a Bitcoin will do. Chop, chop, baby. I'll send you my wallet address. I'm waiting. If it's so worthless, send me one then. Number two, crypto is only used by drug dealers and or for illicit means. Now, I'm not going to lie, this was certainly true back in the day. You hear many a story of someone lamenting the fact that they bought drugs off the dark web for like 300 Bitcoin or something. And if they hadn't have bought LSD or whatever the hell that they bought, they would be a millionaire today. You hear all the time in the crypto space these shoulda, coulda, woulda stories. Whilst it was certainly true back in the day that crypto was often used by drug dealers and for illicit means, that largely isn't the case anymore, especially with how crypto has been adopted by institutions such as banks. Some banks in Australia have adopted crypto. You've got the ANZ Bank, which has introduced its very own cryptocurrency, which is an Australian dollar stable coin. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what a stable coin is, to kind of address the problem of crypto's volatility, they wanted to introduce a crypto token that is pegged to something of stable value or relatively stable value, such as a currency of a country. And so ANZ Bank, which is one of the largest banks in Australia, have their own stablecoin called $1DC. It isn't available for the public yet, but it's being used particularly for international settlements because ANZ doesn't just operate in Australia, but it's been used for large-scale settlements. And that's particularly where cryptocurrency shines as a use case when it comes to international settlement. For those of you who aren't familiar with how the process works, if you have tried to send money internationally, you would know how much of a fucking pain in the ass it is. Banks internationally use the SWIFT transfer system. It all kind of happens through partner bank. Like the money won't be sent directly to the bank. In rare cases, it will be. But a lot of time, if you're sending it internationally, it will go via partner banks and it takes weeks as a process. Whereas crypto happens pretty much instantaneously, depending on the network. Ethereum, it takes a little bit longer, and that's because the network is very highly active. There's been a lot more adoption of crypto in recent years, and it's even legal tender in El Salvador. So it's no longer the case that crypto is used for illicit means. Number 3, crypto is a bubble. Not gonna lie, I kind of agree with this. There has definitely been parallels drawn between crypto as a bubble, and it's been compared with like the .com era, where you had these companies that were receiving insanely inflated valuations just because they were a .com company, like pets.com, for example. That said, the .com bubble, even though it crashed and burned, it still brought us Amazon, which is one of the largest companies in the world today. Whilst 90% of the projects in the crypto space are silly and kind of bullshit, there's still crypto projects that I think will stand the test of time and be very valuable in the near future. Number 4, crypto has no intrinsic value. And this is a really interesting question because I think it also reveals people's current understanding of the traditional finance system. I love to reverse this question on people and get them to tell me, what is the intrinsic value of a $5 note? We don't have the gold standard anymore, okay? It used to be back in the day that a little plastic note that said $50 was backed by a certain amount of gold that was sitting in a bank somewhere. And that is not the case anymore. So technically speaking, the plastic notes that we have in our wallets aren't backed by something that has intrinsic value like gold. So how is a plastic note valuable? It's valuable for 2 reasons, okay? The first is that backed by institutions which we trust, such as governments and institutions like banks. Number 2, generally speaking, in our society, we all agree on the value of a $50 note. That means if we all believe in this value, then we're also willing to trade products and services for it. And it's like, at the end of the day, what is the value of something? The value of something is whatever someone is willing to pay for it. As a corollary to this, it reminds me of Triangle of Sadness, that movie that I think came out last year. I fucking loved it. It's so funny. The basic premise of Triangle of Sadness is that it takes place on this luxury yacht, and it's very much a social commentary, dark comedy kind of film. You see this kind of power hierarchy or power structure on this luxury yacht where you've got these uber wealthy people, and then you've kind of got the wait staff who are often from South Asian countries who are kind of tending for the often white wealthy elite on the luxury yacht. And anywho, the yacht capsizes in the middle of the Mediterranean or whatever, and then a few of the occupants wash up on shore on this island, and it's just hilarious because the power structure on the boat is completely inverted when it comes to the island. It's revealed that the people that had the power, i.e. the customers, as customer is king and whatever else, they actually have no real life skills. They don't know how to start a fire. They don't know how to like fish or hunt for food. Conversely, the wait staff, who were seen as not being in a position of power on the boat, who end up having the most power on the island. The reason why I'm telling you this is like there's this hilarious moment where they're kind of fighting and bickering over like this packet of chips, and one of the rich guys, he's like this rich Russian dude, and he goes up to this lady and he's like, take my Rolex, like this is so valuable, take it. And she's like, what's the value of a Rolex on an island? Similarly, the value of something is whatever someone is willing to pay for it. And another thing, like, I don't think people realize just how feeble our traditional finance systems are, especially considering the fact that, I don't know, in my generation, for example, we've experienced several recessions now in my lifetime. Capitalism still works though, by the way. Does it really work if it constantly needs to be patched up and you constantly need government bailouts? Like, I don't know about that. And this is where I think deflationary assets, or assets that have a limited number in existence, like, for example, gold, there will only be a certain amount of gold in existence. Okay, Bitcoin is kind of seen as digital gold in the sense that it's already pre-programmed that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. I think that's like an idea or a concept worth considering, especially within a context of a financial system, which it's kind of just accepted that our governments are just going to print money each year and continue inventing money. And what that leads to is inflation. I think we all in this Cosy Lives, babe, have firsthand experience of inflation, that the value of our dollars is dwindling. A lot of countries in the Anglosphere, so the US, the UK, and Australia, just allow banks to effectively invent money. And the mechanism by which they invent money is through fractional lending. That means that, say, a bank has 2 million customers, okay? They come in and deposit their pocket money at the bank. The law is such that they only have to keep a certain fraction of all consumer deposits in reserve at the bank with gold or whatever other assets that they have, and that the rest they can effectively lend out. And when they lend out that money, they also charge interest. So it's like this multiplier effect as well. Basically inventing money, bro. Mind you, I'm not an economist. I'm not an economist. I might not be explaining this the best, but in a system where it's kind of just accepted that the value each year of our currency is going to go down by 2%. So 2% is like the standard target for inflation. But it's definitely run away from us in recent years, I think, post-COVID. And that's where I think something like Bitcoin has merit, considering a deflationary asset, especially considering the absolute clusterfuck that is our governments and the way that they're running these countries. I don't know what's going to happen to the US, because if you look at the amount of debt the US is like actually crazy. US debt to GDP, it's like actually outrageous. And like, that's future generations' problems. That's not the current generation's problem. It's also worth mentioning that the Bitcoin white paper was published in 2008 as a direct response to the global financial crisis, which saw, the Fed just like bailing out these fucking banks that were doing subprime mortgages, which is just crazy. It's like they'll privatize the gains from exploiting the public, but they'll socialize the losses, which just pisses me off, personally speaking. Number 5, another common misconception about crypto is that it isn't environmentally friendly. I think the environmental friendliness of a certain crypto project is largely given by its consensus mechanism. So as I mentioned before, Bitcoin is very energy intensive because it requires every node in the network to verify and confirm a transaction. Contrast that with Ethereum. So Ethereum actually transitioned from proof of work, which again required every node in the network to confirm a transaction, to proof of stake, which meant a majority of nodes that had staked a certain amount of ETH would confirm the transaction. So it's much less energy intensive. And Ethereum's transition from proof of work to proof of stake resulted in like a 99.95% reduction in its energy usage, which is hella impressive. It was literally crypto history. With that said though, even in Bitcoin's case, for example, there's definitely different statistics on this, so don't quote me on it. But from what I've seen, it's pretty much a majority of Bitcoin miners, so people who run nodes that confirm the Bitcoin network, a lot of their energy sources are renewable, so hydro energy sources and stuff like that. But I kind of really dislike the amount of like fear mongering and bad PR that comes out about crypto being not being environmentally friendly, because if you look into the research, it's like, well, actually a lot of these companies are using renewable energy sources. One of the biggest crypto projects in the world, Ethereum, transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake to reduce its environmental impact. Number 6, another common crypto misconception is that crypto isn't regulated. Speaking within the context of Australia specifically, but I've seen this more broadly in the US and the UK as well, crypto isn't regulated in the same way as traditional finance companies and their product offerings. Okay, because technically in Australia, crypto in and of itself isn't considered a financial product. It doesn't come under the remit of our financial regulatory bodies per se. And so in that way, crypto companies operating in Australia aren't necessarily regulated to the same degree as like a bank, for example. So to operate a cryptocurrency exchange in Australia, as far as I know, I could be wrong, you're not required to have an Australian Financial Services license or an AFSL to offer cryptocurrency products. However, companies offering crypto products still are regulated. They're regulated from the standpoint of consumer protections, and particularly when it comes to anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws. All crypto exchanges also have to do know your customer checks. So we have to verify people's identity in order for them to be able to exchange their Australian dollars for Dogecoin, for example. They're not like regulated to the extent that banks are regulated, but there's still regulations around consumer protections and anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing laws that these companies offering crypto products have to adhere to. People still have to pay taxes on their crypto as well. It's not like it was back in the days where it was like the wild, wild west of crypto and people making millions and then not paying tax on that and then buying a Lamborghini and then a few years later having to sell the Lamborghini to pay their taxes. Hopefully that gives some clarity on that point. Number 7, crypto has no real world use cases. Now this I kind of partially agree with. A large majority of the crypto space is bullshit, unfortunately. That said though, I will be honest, there are some definite real world use cases. From the global perspective, right, crypto adoption is highest in a lot of developing nations, like even I think Nigeria, it has the highest crypto adoption. One of the reasons why crypto adoption is so high in these developing nations is that for the first time, an individual is able to actually access a financial system with just their mobile phone. You know, in developing nations, sometimes people struggle to even open up a bank account, or nations particularly with unstable government situations where wealth in banks can be seized. For the first time, they're able to access a system without an intermediary like a bank, which sometimes are corrupt in these developing nations, and be able to access the financial system with just a mobile phone. Another area where crypto has a real world use cases, there's been a lot of application of cryptocurrency when it comes to humanitarian efforts and charity donations. So the United Nations, they had a very successful cryptocurrency pilot when Russia invaded Ukraine. There was a lot of people who were donating funds through cryptocurrency to Ukraine directly. That kind of ties into the next use case of crypto, which is particularly when it comes to international settlement and sending funds internationally. Because there's no intermediaries like a government or a bank or a payment processing company, majority of the people that are in the space of crypto are pretty much there to make money. And I think on the whole, people have good intentions, but at the same time, one thing that I do notice is that I think a lot of people are largely drawn to the space because they want to make money. Even though it got made redundant, I was working in the crypto space for a while after that, and ultimately I was like, you know what, this is not for me. I don't want to be personally surrounded by people who are just constantly optimizing towards wealth creation. And I know that's like a little bit of a hot take in today's society, which sees people with wealth as kind of the apex on the food chain. But for me personally, that's just not the value that I live my life by. And I don't want to be surrounded by people who are so narrow in their worldview that they think that money or wealth is the most important thing in life. Because ultimately, my hottest take is that money and wealth is fiction, and it's one of the most powerful religions in the world. At the end of the day, it's like, can you bring any of this wealth with you when you're 6 feet under? No. You can have a pretty casket though. You can't bring any of that wealth into the next life or whatever you believe in. That said, I know I probably sound like an out of touch idealist right now, but I do understand and acknowledge the fact that we do live in a capitalist world where money is important. And obviously, I'm very familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you need money in order to have a roof over your head and food on the table, but also to be a self-actualized human being. I do acknowledge the fact that money is leverage in a lot of ways, and money is power in a lot of ways. And it's like also one thing that I see a lot in the crypto space is just greed. Like the amount of greed that you see is actually ridiculous. This is a juicy ass episode, and it's been a hot minute of me recording. I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. I'm really bad at explaining things very simply, and I'm so sorry. But please let me know if you have any further questions about crypto, because we do not gatekeep in this house. You can DM me on Instagram. Let me know what more you want to know about. Another thing, if crypto piques your interest and tickles your fancy and you want to learn more about it, another thing to be extremely mindful of in the crypto space is that there are unfortunately a lot of scammers and a lot of grifters. Another thing that I kind of hate about the crypto industry is that a lot of people, even people who claim to be educators, they have a vested interest in getting you into cryptocurrency. A lot of people in the space who are educators or influencers or whatever, unfortunately, it's been documented time and time again that they will capitalize upon their audience in order to sell them something. It's something to just be very cautious of. Another thing about crypto is that it does require another level of tech literacy, which I should probably do a separate episode on, maybe like digital hygiene and digital and technological literacy, because the amount of stories I hear of people having like the same password for everything in the year of our Lord 2024 is obscene. It really baffles me when I see people who are literally raw dogging their digital lives by having the same password for everything. It kind of scares me. Like, how are you flying by the seat of your pants like that? How does it feel? Getting into the crypto space, it does require a degree of tech literacy, which is a kind of barrier to entry, unfortunately, into the space. But if you want me to do an episode on that, let me know. As always, do your own research. Be highly cautious. A lot of people are trying to sell you something. I am not trying to sell you anything, okay? I'm not trying to sell you a course. I'm not trying to get you to buy a certain token or NFT. So let that be known. Okay, but yeah, let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll speak to you in my next podcast episode. Bye.